What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today's video, we are back to take a look at another Detroit Lions draft pick of the 2022 NFL Draft. And today, we are staying in day number 3 of the 2022 NFL Draft. Our next video, we're going to hop into day number 2 as we continue to work through all of these draft picks. But this one's different. This is special. This is our first offensive player that we are going to do a breakdown of in this year's draft class. We took a look at Eze, the offensive tackle out of TCU, but that was an undrafted free agent signing. Our first draft pick that we're going to take a look at on the offensive side of the ball. The Lions took 2 offensive players in this year's draft, so let's get it started.
With the 177th pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select James Mitchell, tight end. Virginia Tech.
Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here, and we are back to take a look at another Detroit Lions draft pick, man. And I'm excited for this, man. I love this series. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying it. It seems that way. Our last video, we took a look at linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez out of Oklahoma State, man. He was one of the most fun players that I've watched so far, so I really enjoyed that. As we said, we also took a look at James Houston and Chase Lucas as well. We're going to continue to work our way through every Detroit Lions draft pick this year. Our next video will be day number 2, but this was the draft pick that made us wait. This is the one that had us sitting there for 80 picks, and we're just like, oh my goodness, are we going to move? No, we're not. But we don't know, so we got to stay tuned because, hey, Lions might trade up. Didn't happen. We sat there for 80 picks, kind of like last year after we traded up and got Derek Barnes out of Purdue. We had this extremely long wait. Actually, last year's was even longer because we had to wait until round number 7. But still a very long wait. But either way, the Detroit Lions stood pat, and they got another playmaker on the offensive side of the ball at a position that they were lacking that a little bit, especially when we didn't have TJ Hockenson, but specifically that number 2 tight end. We're trying to figure out who that is. We saw Brock Wright last season. He wasn't bad. I actually liked Brock Wright. I think it'd be nice to keep him on the team this year. We'll see what the Lions do there, but they were clearly lacking maybe a little bit more of that receiving type of tight end once TJ Hockenson went down and some of that production that maybe they would have liked to had out of that position. So we got a weapon at pick number 177, and that is tight end James Mitchell out of Virginia Tech. Man, here we go. Now, James Mitchell is, let's just get the elephant in the room. James Mitchell is coming off a pretty serious injury, just like Jamison Williams, another guy that tore his ACL, but his was a little bit different because it happened at the beginning, the 2021 season at Virginia Tech. Just 2 games into the season, he tore his ACL. So he's much further along in the rehab process, you would believe, as he is aiming to return by training camp. So hopefully we get this guy back soon. It seems like he'll be back much sooner than Jamison Williams probably is, because Jamison Williams, it happened at the end of the year. This guy was at the beginning of the season in 2021. So that's a good note here. Now, we don't know what he's going to look like returning from that, but clearly the Lions had some confidence in their staff and what they got on the injury and how they feel about this guy's going to recover and what he's going to come back looking like. Now, unfortunately, because of that injury, we don't actually have combine scores. I mean, we have one. That's bench press reps. He had 18 bench press reps, so there you go. If you were coming for combine scores, that's what we got. That's it. We don't actually have combine scores because he was, of course, injured. We do have a report that was put out there that he ran a 4.76 in high school. Obviously, that's probably with someone, using a little stopwatch. Don't know if that's legit or not. Don't even know if that's true, to be honest. That's just what I've read. I don't know if it's true, but maybe it is. Either way, we really don't have anything aside from the measurables and the bench press reps of the player. This is a 6'4", 249-pound tight end out of Virginia Tech that, going back to high school, was a 3-star recruit coming out. He and his parents, I believe, were Virginia Tech fans, so it was, kind of an easy transition there. But he played in an interesting offense. They kind of transitioned to sort of a wildcat style offensively, and because of that, even though he was a 3-star tight end coming out, he had the ball in his hands a lot. He basically played like a quarterback in high school, so he had a lot of experience rushing the football. He even said that in an interview with Good Morning Football, is that, hey, yeah, we were kind of playing a wildcat offense, and I just got the ball and usually ran. That's kind of how we did things offensively. He came out, 2 different listings. ESPN said 210, another site said 230, so I'm not sure exactly what weight he was at when he ran the 4.76, if anybody even knows. But now, of course, he's putting on a little more weight. He was a pure tight end with Virginia Tech, but he still was versatile offensively. He was used all over the place offensively, and he was even, I believe, listed as their emergency quarterback because of the fact that he was kind of used like a quarterback a little bit in high school, which, as we get into this breakdown, I think it was very beneficial that he has that background because it does seem to show up when you watch his film, it's actually the area that I like him the most. So we'll talk about all that. We'll talk about his comparison, what his role will be this season. But let's start off with the production. So last season, of course, he didn't play very much. Okay, so there's not much production here. He had 5 receptions and 7 targets for 42 yards and a touchdown. That's it. Not a lot of production, right? But that's what we have from 2021 because he didn't really play. But the tight end position, you usually get a lot of guys coming out that have little to no production at the tight end position, because usually in college you're seeing either the guy's in a spread offense and he's basically a receiver, or he's just a blocking tight end and that's all he does. Usually you get kind of one of the two things, and that's pretty much it. But the Lions found a guy in 2020, he had 24 receptions on 40 targets for 415 yards and 4 touchdowns. So the Lions found a guy that didn't line up every single play in the slot, didn't line up every play as a receiver, still lined up a ton in line, was productive from both positions, but at the same time gave you a little bit of both because he was a willing and effective blocker, unlike a lot of tight ends you see come out that are 220 and they can't block, or it's like they're 235, they can't block at all, they don't even try to block, they're just used as receivers. So you get a little bit of both worlds here, which you don't see a ton with some of the tight ends specifically coming out this year. There was a few, but there wasn't a ton. But as we said, James Mitchell coming off his injury probably pushed him down the board a little bit. You don't get the combine scores. You don't know what he's going to come back like, and you didn't get to see him in 2021. So I'm sure it did push him down the board a little bit, but he definitely showed some very legitimate flashes when he was healthy, and we can hope that he's able to get back to that form. Actually, let's hope that he recovers and he looks way better than that, because that has been a thing that we have seen guys recover from ACLs and look bigger, faster, stronger than they even were before the injury. So let's hope that's the case, and let's hope that he can get back as soon as possible, but at the same time, in a healthy fashion. You know what I'm saying? Don't rush this thing back. But it sounds like he's going to be in a pretty good schedule for the Lions in terms of playing this season. And it should be because of some good competition for that room that we have right now, specifically with guys like Brock Wright at the tight end position. This was also a team captain last season, which kind of follows the trend of a lot of Lions additions in the draft. Team captains, Josh Paschal was the 3-time captain. No other player in Kentucky has ever done that. Team captains, leaders of the team. I mean, these are guys that are voted amongst their peers as like, hey, he's that guy, you know, the guy that brings them together. That doesn't mean you have to be loud. That doesn't mean you have to be the funny guy. I mean, hey, it helps, but it doesn't mean you have to be. You just have to be that leader that people look up to, that kind of pulls the room together. And James Mitchell was a team captain last season. I believe they had 5 or 6 team captains last year. Let's dive right into this with James Mitchell. I want to hit really 2 specific categories here. We talk about blocking, run blocking, a little bit of pass protection as well, and of course the receiving side of it. And the receiving side of it is an area which I know the Lions would like to get a little bit of help here for sure, and I think they will with this draft pick for sure. But I want to start with the blocking side first, because to me this is an area that it seemed like the Lions have made clear. You don't have to be the best blocker, but you'd have to be competitive, and you have to be able to possibly step in line and help us block, right? Flexibility is great. Being able to move different spots is awesome, but you have to be able to help us as a blocker, whether that's as a lead blocker, out in space, in line, whatever that may be. We need some of that ability for you to be kind of like a, I guess you could say like a two-way player at the tight end position. And to me, James Mitchell, it kind of stands out from the rest of tight ends in the way that he blocks specifically into the second level. I'm not saying he's the most dominant blocker. He doesn't consistently pancake guys. I think I've only seen one rep where he actually had a guy on his back, but what really stood out, what really kind of separated himself from a lot of blocking tight ends I've seen, is his ability to stay connected, stay engaged, work towards the second, the third levels against defensive backs as a run blocker, separate himself from a lot of guys that you see. So when you see that potential to be a lead blocker, to line up as an H-back, to get in the backfield, whatever it may be, great engagement where he just kept working, kept driving his legs, fighting really hard to stay connected downfield to open up run lanes. That's an area where I think he kind of just looked different from a lot of players. Now, I do want to throw this into the same category, and this comes with screens. Now, we'll talk about the receiving side in a second, but you talk about screen blocking from a tight end. This wouldn't be an area you usually expect to have the most success, but this is where Virginia Tech like to use him a lot as well. Not only could they throw screens his way, which we'll talk about more, but they could use him as a blocker on wide receiver screens, of course, running back screens, but on receiver screens. Get him outside, allow him to block defensive backs, get in the way, wall those guys off, and stay engaged. It's not one of these things where I get connection, I tag him, and then the guy takes off free. It's stay engaged with him and really try to create this open lane for whoever has the football. I think there's a couple areas where right now he excels as a blocker, and while I think he can improve overall his technique, there's a couple areas where he excels. As we said, working towards the second level, picking up linebackers, defensive backs, whether that's on a receiver screen, out in space as a blocker. He really seems to thrive in this area, that ability to block towards the second level, and you'll see it, him work from the defensive line, get up to the second level, play under control, great positioning, open up a run lane. You see it on screens. You see it with defensive backs. I actually think, and you don't see it with a lot of guys. A lot of guys really struggle with defensive backs because they make connection, they can block them, but they struggle to make connection. I think he actually is his best as a run blocker against defensive backs. When we talk about blocking towards the second and third level, effort, obviously it checks the box when you watch him. While some of the technique needs to be cleaned up here, you do see just a lot of intelligence as a blocker, understanding where the play is trying to develop, where the running back's lanes are supposed to be, and how I need to wall off. And he's consistently working to position himself to open up a lane for the running back where he may not get the push. He may not run the guy completely out of the play, right? He may not put someone on his back, but he tries to create that lane, whether that's inline or, again, working out in space. He tries to create those run lanes. One of my favorite reps, you see him all the way on the right on this play, and you see how he really tags 3 defenders on the same play. He starts at the first level, then works towards the second level, and then up to the third level. It's that kind of intelligence to just keep working, find the next guy, where's the run supposed to go here, and position myself to open up that run play. Plays like this are beautiful. So you're going to see they're going to crash down on the defensive tackle here from North Carolina. So the left tackle, and he's all the way on the bottom of the screen. That's James Mitchell. They're going to crash down on this defensive tackle. He's going to pass it off to the tackle. So he's going to crash down, push him inside to his left tackle. Behind them, the left guard is going to pop out, and he's going to pull and pick up that edge rusher. Then his next responsibility after passing that off is to get to the second level. Watch how he creates a lane and walls off this linebacker. But notice how he sinks, he bends, and he works to get underneath the pads here, wall off the linebacker, and create a wide open running lane. This is beautiful. I mean, this is awesome. As well as the effort to stay engaged, to battle through the play. And if that technique gets right, he gets a really good rep. And if you're a defensive back, he can drive you out of the play. That's where you see some of those fun reps, and he just sticks with it. Like, if he gets contact, it's not one of those things where he's going to bump you and leave, not really stay connected through the play. He's going to try to drive you out of the play. I think a big part of that is his legs, is his lower body. While his hand placement isn't always great, especially on the initial punch, it is his legs and his feet that continue to drive, that continue to keep him connected with defenders so that he can move towards the second and third level. Most part, avoid holding, blocking a little more inline. And again, this shows up when he's lined up like an H-back, or he's lined up in the backfield, whatever it may be as a lead blocker. You do see the ability to really jump off the line of scrimmage. Here they're going to run a zone to his direction, and you're going to see him jump off the line again, position early, and then you're going to see him start to turn the defender to really seal the edge here for the running back. Getting a cutback lane. It's those kind of things where he can just jump off the line of scrimmage as an inline blocker. But this is also an area where he's just not consistently successful right now, and I think there's technique that needs to be cleaned up. The good thing is that the heart, the passion to block, the willingness to block is all there. Right now, I don't think some of the strength is there necessarily, but all of those things are there. So you can teach it, right? You can improve what he is as a blocker. That's the great starting point. But in line right now, he's just not consistently successful. Naturally, he does lack some of that mass and some of that power to be a dominant run blocker naturally as a tight end position. You get some guys that come out 270, they could bench press 28, things like that. He doesn't really have that kind of power. He also doesn't have that mass build up right now. So I think in the NFL, if you want to utilize him more as that and you want more push, more drive off the line, he needs to get a little bit stronger. He's got to get stronger right now, because even if he has a good rep and he gets under the pads, gets good leverage, good hand placement, he still doesn't get movement. If anything, he's just kind of walling off that defender. He doesn't get any kind of push as a drive blocker. So I think in just terms of power, even if the leverage is good and he wins the leverage battle, you just don't see a lot of power. It's one area as a blocker that I think you can improve, and really this comes in all assets, however he's blocking, but specifically I think it shows up early in run plays. And again, this is working as an H-back. This is if a guy's coming downhill and, getting towards him quickly. If he's working downhill into the second level, usually this doesn't show up as much of an issue because he's kind of more the attacker. But when he's in line, when the guys are coming at him, I think one thing he can improve upon, and this can be improved, is keeping his hands ready. You see him a lot of times as a blocker, his hands are down by his side, and by the time he gets his hands up, he's already given up his chest. He gives up his chest a lot, gives up that frame, and he gets hit in the chest, and then of course that's just going to halt your movement. He doesn't even have that natural power, so now it halts his movement. And it also can lead to, and you see this with hand placement, they get wide. His hands get wide. Now, not only can this be an issue for holding, he didn't draw many holding because, again, I think he did a really good job of moving his feet. So it was one of those things where, okay, defender's trying to escape, but instead of just latching on and kind of going for a ride and getting a holding call, he moves his feet to stick with you. His hands can get wide. And not only can that, really negate some of that push and some of that drive that you're getting, but it also makes it a little bit difficult sometimes for you to stay connected. And of course, getting that drive and avoiding some of those holding calls, his hands can get wide. And this can also lead to something that you do have to watch for, because I've seen it many times for him as a blocker. Happens in line a lot. But you will see him start to put his head down on contact where he doesn't see what he's hitting. So that's something that I would, make a note of, is him putting his head down. I think, again, having sometimes late hands, inconsistent hand placement when you talk about the technique there, kind of just pairing it all together with his feet, and that's an area where he's going to need improvement. Because of that, you will see him start to kind of lead with his head. He puts his head down, doesn't always see. It can be dangerous for injuries as well. I think technique could be cleaned up, make him more of a mover as a run blocker than he is right now. But there's definitely that willingness, that passion, that kind of heart, that desire you want as a guy that has blocking upside, because a lot of it to me is mental, and then the technique thing we can clean up.
And it's the little things I enjoy. The way he can jump off the line of scrimmage, seal the end here for a defensive end to allow this pulling guard to come around, or even when you see him off the backside on zone rushing plays, that kind of effort, but that jump off the line of scrimmage, that willingness, we can clean up the hand placement, the technique to make you more impactful as a drive blocker, to get more push.
I really have a lot of notes in pass protection. I didn't see him utilized here a ton, but it does seem like he's actually not a bad pass protector. Now, does that mean I want him lined up against defensive end? No way. But if I need him in there, especially for a quick passing set, I want him in for just a little bit of extra pass protection. He's a guy that can really just stay on the outside, try to kind of force it into the tackle a little bit more. But there were times they used him as an extra pass protector. His best strength seemed to be his feet here. Match up with some speed rushers. If that was a defensive back coming off the edge on a blitz, or if that was a speed rushing edge rusher, some of those feet to kind of stay in front of it. Ask him to try to protect the inside on a quick passing set. And then, of course, he can get set up by a hesitation move, and he can be beat around the edge. Right now, he's a pretty good mover. Again, he doesn't use his hands the best, doesn't have a ton of power. The length isn't bad. It's just under 33 inches. So the length actually isn't terrible, but he doesn't use that extremely well, and he can get his hands completely locked out of the play where he doesn't even get to use them. Right now, it's more about his agility and his feet that make him a helpful pass protector. So let's talk about James Mitchell as a receiving threat, okay? A guy that you can throw the football to. And this is a lot of different categories. It's not just hands. It's also what you can do once the ball's in your hands. It's also route running. It's all of the above. And the Lions felt like they could use another guy that brings some of this element to the tight end position. That's not to say they needed a Kyle Pitts. Again, I think they like the flexibility, and they really want the flexibility of a guy that can line inline and also block, but potentially give you some of that receiving upside and receiving production, where if you don't have Hockenson, he can help out a little bit. Even if you do have Hockenson, just be more of a threat on the field. And there's one area where I really like him here, and we'll talk about his role at the end. We'll get to that, but let's kind of break it all down. I want to start with this route running first, get into his hands, then we'll talk about what he does once the ball is in his hands. Let's start with the route running. This was an area where he seemed pretty limited in terms of route tree. Not to say he was limited, but what they asked him to do at Virginia Tech in the games I watched from 2020 and 2021, he seemed pretty limited in the route tree they asked of him. Now, he did line up in a lot of different spots, right? We talk about the flexibility. The guy is extremely versatile, like extremely versatile. And when I say versatile, I don't just mean, well, I can put him at safety. No, like versatile in terms of he can give you an impact for there, meaning he can line up in line. He can be used as a removable tight end. He can be used in motion. He lined up in the slot. Sometimes they lined him up out wide. They put him in the backfield. They've handed him the football. He's lined up on as a return man in special teams. He's played a lot of special teams. And again, he could be your emergency quarterback, kind of like a Logan Thomas. I don't think I'd want him playing quarterback. I don't know. I didn't watch much of his high school stuff. But the point is, there is tons of flexibility with him on the field, where I think in areas that he could help you as an offense. So it opens up the playbook a little bit. But the route tree seemed a little small of what they kind of asked him to do here. Now, I think the potential is high, but I think what they asked him to do is pretty slim. When they lined him up on the outside, you were getting either a vertical route or you were getting a slant one-on-one. That's usually what it was, which makes sense. He's a tight end. But when he was in a slot, you'd see like a wheel route. You'd see him work into the flats. You'd see him work the seam. You'd see him cross over the middle behind linebackers. That seemed to be a majority of his route tree. Beyond that, there were some little things in there. Sometimes you get some angle routes where he'd make a little cut inside, but it wasn't often. So a lot of vertical routes, wheel routes, attacking the middle of the field, sitting down over the middle, 5 yards over the middle, sit down over the middle of the field, or screens. We will throw in screens. We're going to talk about that more when we talk about what he could do with the ball in his hands. Was used on screens as well. But the route tree wasn't extremely deep in terms of asking to make tons of crisp cuts, things like that. But I think there's more potential here because he does seem to be pretty agile, seems to have pretty good control in the lower body. You talk about the speed and you talk about the athleticism there, things like that. I think he showed some adequate burst, in specific matchups where he can be a threat over the middle of the field. He can be a threat running vertical seams routes, things like that. He wasn't extremely fast, but I think he could be somewhat of a threat where you did see some burst, some acceleration burst potential, coming out of a rounded wheel route, whatever that may have been working, up field. There was some burst there in terms of speed. Not to say he's super twitchy, well-balanced route runner, not super fast, not the most explosive. There was a respectable burst that could allow him to open up the field and work, down the seams, things like that, work into the third level as a route runner. However, one area that I really, really liked him, and this is something I saw a lot of people giving knocks on him for, but to me, I actually really liked him in this area, and that was his route running speed. Now, I do think he could be better, specifically when he lined up on the outside one-on-one. I think in certain routes, like you ask him to run a slant. I think he could be better here in multiple ways. I think there is inconsistency off the line where he doesn't always come off as fast as every once in a while you'll see him explode off the line like, ooh, there's some juice there. Doesn't always come off like that off the line of scrimmage in those situations. I also think he rounds his routes a little bit more than he has to. I think he's a little bit more crisp and he has more flexibility than he shows with some routes. I think he rounds them a little bit more and cut. I think he could be a little bit crisper with his routes, and that is an area that I would agree. Yeah, it'd be kind of cool to see him be a little more crisp with some of those routes consistently to try to create more separation, because that's going to be extremely important at the NFL to beat man coverage against linebackers even. I think it'd be a little more crisp here. But what I liked about him is I thought, timing's everything. That's the name of the game, right? I mean, you could talk about, okay, well, how fast is he running the route? But that doesn't mean you're running the route well. Timing is everything. Lining up with the quarterback's progressions. When is he going to get to this progression? How do I time up my route so that when he drops back, when he gets through this read and this read, he's looking at me, I'm right where I need to be. I'm right in the spot where he's looking. I'm right in this zone hole. That kind of thing is super, super important. And that's where I thought he was really good, was the route timing, specifically attacking the middle of the field, timing up his routes to create a lane, to find the hole in the defense for the quarterback, where when he got to that read, he was right in front of him, right where he needed to be, and he made himself a good target for the quarterback. As soon as he came out of his cut and it was like, okay, I'm here, waved his arm, put his arm up, like, I'm here. Like we said, especially when you're attacking, kind of like the middle of the field in zone coverage, they will ask you to run some of those routes where you kind of just get in the way of a linebacker a little bit. You're trying to open up this guy, you're trying to get in the way of the linebacker's zone where he's kind of running into you. You're just kind of in the way, but you're still running your route. You can't just run into him and set a screen. That's a flag. It's getting in the way of linebackers, timing up his route, getting in the way, and opening up someone else.
Another variation of these timing routes were things like this, where he would show that he was blocking and then cross the middle of the field. And they did this a lot of different ways. Sometimes these were much deeper. There was a huge play they had on this, but just little things like this. Show the block, release, then make the play over the middle. This play sounded great, but again, the route speed at which he plays at, the way he kind of sells that he's going to come down and crash and block to set this up beautifully for the quarterback.
He didn't always get a ton of separation there, but you could tell what he was trying to do. Now, with that being said, again, I think you would like to see more consistent bursts off the line, playing faster through his route. Saw some of that lower body agility and flexibility to really change directions, more crisp than what he showed, which can open up his route tree. Because, again, I think what you saw, he's a little bit limited Virginia Tech on what they asked him to do. He's been successful from the slot. He's been successful from inline. He's had reps that he's won from the outside. So I think you could do a lot of different things with him as a route runner. You can expand a little bit upon that route tree. You could ask him to make cuts, right? You could ask him to set up routes. You just want to clean up how crisp some of those routes actually are. But I think he has adequate athleticism, adequate burst, where he could create some separation, especially against linebackers. I liked him best with the free release, but I thought he was pretty darn impactful from an in-the-line, situation at slot. He can be pretty good as well, especially when he's working some of those underneath routes. And also the screen game, which we'll talk about more when we talk about what he can do with the ball in his hands, because that's an area where he can be very impactful. Again, you talk about what he can do as a blocker there, but he's also pretty impactful there as a receiver as well. This category, of course, is one that's extremely important, and that's hands. That's catching the football. We talk about route running, getting open, but can you catch the football? That's a very important one. And while I think for the most part, he's a pretty good pass catcher, he does some things that I really do like, and I think he's really good in some areas as a pass catcher. I do have some small little gripes. Talk about that body control, the flexibility, the catch radius. He's got a lot of grabs away from his body in traffic. All of those things stand out pretty quickly. The ability to scoop down to the ground and pick a pass up off the turf, that kind of thing, but also then come back, get up a foot in the air and make a grab out of the sky. It doesn't have to be on his frame. He shows that flexibility to make some grabs. And sometimes you have that, especially on underneath passes. Some of those check downs late in play action sets when you have a guy kind of leaking into the flat. Here comes the pressure. The quarterback's just trying to get it off. It may not be right on point, but that flexibility to reach out and make a grab, that's very important. And I think you see that very quickly when you watch him with the amount of catches that he actually has away from his frame. But to tie in with that, I love this concentration. And from a tight end, I think you got to have this. With the amount of times you're attacking the middle of the field, you have to have great concentration. Simple as that. You have to be able to play through traffic. You have to be able to catch knowing you're going to take a hit. You have to be able to leave your feet in the middle of the field knowing that, hey, someone might just hit you. Now, I get you're bigger, you're a tight end, but you have to be willing to do that. But also that concentration where if a ball is tipped in the air against North Carolina, I think this was that game where this pass is tipped and you see him kind of reach back, scoop this thing up, and then run after he catches this pass. That kind of concentration also shows up when it comes to taking a hit, attacking the middle of the field, taking a hit over the middle, but still coming up with the football. Those kind of things didn't seem like issues, okay? I didn't really see concentration drops. I did see drops, but his drops to me weren't concentration, taking your eyes off the football, not being locked in. His drops were more of a technique thing than anything. He has very soft hands, which he kind of, what you notice is with a lot of his pass catches, the speed at which he takes a catch and transitions that into a tuck and run is extremely impressive. And especially from this position, you don't always see that. Receivers, really good receivers, that transition from catch to tuck, and if that's very smooth, it can open up some more yak possibilities. This is a spot where he's great as a pass catcher. He has extremely soft hands, and when you watch passes thrown to him, the ball almost kind of just dissolves. It kind of absorbs his hands. It kind of just dissolves into his body almost. I don't know how to describe it, but it's very soft hands. I'm sure if the ball was thrown to him, you wouldn't even hear him catch it. It supports what he can do after the catch very well, but I don't think he plays with those strong hands when you talk about plucking passes away from your body, and you see it in a lot of different ways. First off, in a jump ball situation, right? Jump ball, catch point, defenders draped all over you. You got to go up there and just snag it. You don't have an opportunity to kind of have that catch transition into a tuck. Instead, you're trying to just pluck it, strong hands, finish the process. You don't really see that. You see more of a, okay, the catch, and I'm going to kind of pull it into my body. You don't see those strong hands to hold onto the football away from his frame. To show up specifically, I think when passes are kind of at stomach level, sometimes even lower, because a lot of those grabs are more scoops, which makes sense, right? He's flipping his hands over, he's making the grab. But again, you don't see the plucks down there. I think Jelani Woods had some plucks down there where it was like, bang, he would just snag that thing. For him, again, it becomes more of a scoop. And that's fine. You see the flexibility, right? But it becomes more of a scoop than it is a pluck and then tuck. It's more of a scoop into the body, where if you get passes that are a little off his frame, maybe there's one when he's sitting over the middle, it's here, and he's trying to like kind of catch it and scoop it into his body. He's unable to finish through the process with some contact over the middle of the field. So that's kind of the pushback to it. Something I thought he might be better at, honestly, was kind of posting up the middle of the field. Now, he's not the biggest tight end. He's only 6'4", 250, so he's not like 6'7", 260, and it's like, gosh, this guy is huge for linebackers. But kind of walling off linebackers, I think he could do better getting off the line here, getting off quicker, getting into this route quicker. But you didn't see that success of posting up, boxing out a defender, and then making that grab. He has the size. Sure, I think he'd be better here, but you don't see that. And it also shows up in jump ball situations, fade routes. He's not the kind of guy, from what I've seen so far, and he could definitely improve here. Don't get it twisted. But the kind of guy that I want to line up one-on-one within 10 yards and throw a fade to him. I just haven't seen that kind of success. Now, if I'm throwing a back shoulder pass.
Now, this is the kind of play that shows you his potential from within the 10-yard line. First off, he's going against an outside cornerback here. The outside jab on this play, then some of that burst upfield, get the inside position, uses his body to wall off the defender, and then the finish, the catch radius, the soft hands, and concentration.
If I'm getting creative with it, if the play is broken down, he had a really nice catch where the play was broken down, that kind of thing. He didn't seem to do great with kind of the jump ball situations. Now, to be fair, some of these passes were terrible. They gave him no shot. Like, you're throwing it behind him. He can't post up, jump off. The ball's not getting there. But this scenario where also didn't seem great is kind of walling off a defender, jump ball, go up and get it, that kind of thing, using all that height to his advantage. So those were a couple things. Now, when you talk about catching above his helmet, though, you talk about catching outside his frame, he can do that. Very soft hands, the arm length, you have the reach, the catch radius, it's all there, and he's concentrating. He makes plays through traffic, so I think it's there. He's a good pass catcher. Don't make it sound like he's not a good pass. He's a good pass catcher with some little minor things that I would poke holes in for now that definitely seem like they could be improved upon. You see some really nice grabs above his head, concentration, getting up above his head, making some grabs. And while his hands don't always seem to be great in terms of technique and it looks sort of awkward, he still comes down with the football. I saw it sometimes in some of the catch and run situations, not all, but you would see like a slant or a crosser where he would kind of try to let the ball to his body a little bit, that we could catch it, tuck immediately and run. And that obviously had a drops in there, but also can let defenders onto the football rather than plucking with the strong hands, tuck and run.
This is a play we partially showed earlier. I like the concentration here. Doesn't take his eyes off the football, but you see how he's like letting it into his body. He's more clapping this pass than he is putting his two hands out and snagging it.
That being said, this is the area where I like him the best because, you know, you go from the catch to what can you do after the catch. And for a lot of tight ends, most tight ends, it's like, okay, we're not getting much here. But this, for James Mitchell, is a different story. He has a background running with the football, and he looks very natural with the ball in his hands. Now, 250, he's a pretty big dude, right? So he's got some size to him. Now, if he's 270, might look a little different, but he's very natural with the football in his hands at this point. Very natural when the ball's in his hands to make something happen. Again, you go back to playing high school football where they're running a lot of wildcat. It's just run the ball as soon as I get to snap. It was kind of that type of thing. You look at the statistics that he put up when the ball was in his hands. He averaged over 10 yards after the catch and 16 yards per reception. He is a big play threat beyond just I can stretch the seams and things like that. More so what I can do once the ball is in my hands. He is so smooth at taking a catch, tucking it, and running. So darn smooth. The transition is so seamless for him to immediately get yards after the catch. And I like with it is that he protects the ball really well. I didn't see him fumble at all, but I would doubt he has many fumbles. Maybe he does. Maybe he did in the past, and that's why he plays like this. But you see how well he protects that football. I mean, he gets that thing up here tight. But his catch, put it up here, and I'm gone. I'm off to the races. It's so smooth that at times he gets him in trouble because he's trying to get that tuck so fast and go. But man, it is so smooth. The catch to tuck to run after the catch, and it leads to big plays once the ball in his hands. But it's not just, oh, he's sort of fast so he can do some things. He actually has really good contact balance. Again, it's weird because you're talking about a tight end. The amount of broken tackles I saw him have was sort of strange. Also showed some body control where he could slam on the brakes, which allowed defenders to go by. He's not shifty. I'm not going to say that. He's not super explosive or twitchy with the ball in his hands, but there's contact balance and there's body control that a lot of tight ends don't seem to possess, especially at 250. Now, if he's 220, I expect this. This is where it becomes a very big playmaker in terms of screens. Now, I know you're thinking screens, tight end screens. Remember how many tight end screens lines through last year? So yeah, don't just think like, oh, it's tight end screen. Who does that? We do that. We do that, okay? You know who also did that? The LA Rams. Look, for the last 2 days, I've been watching golf in 2019, 2020 with the Rams. Just kind of seeing it. You know, I always have to go back, see what they did. How are the Lions maybe taking stuff from what they did when Sean McVay was there and kind of how they build that roster? Well, we're talking about what he kind of reminds me of. The role and what he gives me vibes of is the type of tight ends that the Rams have brought in. The Gerald Everetts, the Tyler Higbees. You look at a Gerald Everett, you take a look, okay, what was his profile coming out? And while he's not Gerald Everett, you know, he may not be as dynamic of an athlete coming out. Remember, he was a round 2 pick, though, so there's also that. He was 6'3", 240, so he was a little bit lighter. But you look at a guy like him, the two biggest things that stuck out. He was athletic, he made plays once the ball was in his hands, but at the same time, he needs better technique. Same exact thing I think of when I think of this player, James Mitchell. Better technique as a pass catcher, better technique as a run blocker and pass protector. But he's athletic, great body control. Because remember, athletic is not just I'm fast. This guy ran a 4.62. They're fast for that size. But athletic also speaks to flexibility, body control. All those things are athletic. So it makes me think of a Gerald Everett, where if you watch the Rams, a lot of underneath passes, a lot of getting to the flats, a lot of screens, that kind of thing. Get at the ball, let him make some things happen once the ball's in his hands. Now, could he attack over top? Sure, but Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee, you throw him a little out route, 3 yards, picks up 7. Those kind of little things, throw him screens. The amount of tight end screens we ran, or fake running back screens to a tight end screen, that kind of thing that we ran to Hockenson, that's what it gives me vibes of. So if you're like, why this kind of tight end? Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee. The Lions like guys that can do that. I didn't think Brock Wright was very good in this area. Hockenson did a little bit here. He wasn't bad, which, by the way, I've come to really appreciate what Hockenson could do as a pass catcher after watching a lot of tight ends. This is an area where Brock Wright I didn't think was great, where it was like, okay, give him the ball in his hands, let him do something afterwards. Shane Zylstra didn't seem to bring that much either. This guy brings that. Gerald Everett comes out 9.1 yards after the catch, right? That's what he averaged. Our guy's averaging over 10 yards after the catch. So it's that kind of thing where he makes plays once the ball's in his hands, natural feel once the football's in his hands, in the open space, that kind of thing, that competitiveness. That's where I think the Lions can utilize him. Again, red zone threat, I don't know how great he is as a red zone threat right now in terms of just throwing up a jump ball, but I definitely think there's a lot you can do with him because you can just hand him the football, and they've done that. He had like 5 rushing touchdowns at Virginia Tech as a tight end. They just hand him the football. There you go. You're natural doing this, so let's just hand you the football just like you did in high school. So that's his probably biggest strength to me, and it's not easy to find at this position. He needs to improve for sure, especially the technique side. But once he gets the football, he is a playmaker to make something happen. And the Lions like those guys that you give him the football and you let him do something, like a Gerald Everett, like a Tyler Higbee was. So that's the fit I see, but also can line up in line and block, not be a guy I have to take off field. Now, with that being said, Virginia Tech, he wasn't like the big blocker. Hawkinson's still probably the blocker, right? If it's like, okay, we want one tight end to help us block, Hawk's probably that guy. This to me is more of an F tight end role, more of a movement tight end. We line him at H-back. We put him in the backfield. We put him in the slot. We put him in inline. We motion him. He seems like that, more of a movement tight end. Meanwhile, Hawkinson is more of the inline type of tight end, but again, can move, do the same type of things, just like our guy can. Hawkinson can do it all. I mean, really, Hawkinson can do it all. While he does have issues, and we get on because he was a top pick, he literally can bring everything to the table. This guy, though, movement tight end, second level, third level, screens, lead block. I mean, think about how many wide receiver screens we ran, where you got tight ends out there trying to block. You got to have guys that will go block and get connection. He can do that. So I can put him in a slot, throw a receiver screen his way, have him block, and he'll do it. And he'll probably be very successful at it in comparison to a lot of our receivers. So that's kind of the role I see for James Mitchell playing within the Lions offense. I think that's what he looked like to me, is that kind of player that gives us some more of that receiving threat as a number 2 tight end. Will he be the 2 tight end? I don't know. That'll be something we have to see. I think games will be dependent because, again, sometimes he wasn't on the field for Virginia Tech. If they had one tight end, they were running the football, or they were blocking heavy. Sometimes he wouldn't be out there because he wasn't a dominant inline blocker. But he could absolutely be the 2 tight end this season who'll compete with Brock Wright. It's good competition, though. It really is. And to me, he gives you, again, more of the rack, more of the receiving upside than what Brock Wright gave you. But by the way, I did really like Brock Wright. So respect to Brock Wright. Nothing against him. I really liked what he did for us last season. I thought, I thought he did some good things. And he may end up, if we keeping 3 tight ends, he'll probably be the 3rd tight end on the roster. But this kind of player also gives you that flexibility where you're not like, oh my gosh, I have only blockers. You got a receiving guy in James Mitchell as well. So keeping Brock Wright, if you wanted to keep 3 tight ends, so I'm not saying they will, you could do it. You definitely could do it now with this type of player. The ACL injury, things like that, I think this feels like more of an upside pick than anything, but to me, it just fills that role. It's that kind of player. It's the Gerald Everetts, it's the Tyler Higbees, it's that style of tight end, which immediately I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. After watching 2019 and 2020 with the Rams, the amount of screens, and by the way, I thought they did too many to the point where I was like, dude, help your quarterback. Why are you running screens every play? I'm not going to get into all that. I could go on a rant. Point is, something that they did a lot, and one thing that I noticed from those games that I watched 2019, 2020 again from Goff, he throws the screens pretty darn well. He's really good at sticking in the pocket, hanging in, taking a hit, delivering from different arm angles, and delivering a good screen, knowing where that screen is. He's really good at that, and then protecting the football on screens as well. He looked better with the Rams than he did with us, to be honest, throwing screens. So there is an area where he's good, or those play actions where his check down is the tight end. Those are 2 areas where we're probably going to continue to use him, and we're probably going to continue to ask him to do. So this guy makes a ton of sense for Lions in terms of fit. Impact year 1, I think he'll probably end up being the number 2 tight end at some point in the season, but I do think there's legitimate impact to make things happen, and he could probably rack up 300 plus yards. I could see it, a lot of that coming after the catch. He could probably rack up that. I could definitely see that, a lot of checkdowns, but I could definitely see that being a thing. Touchdown-wise, who knows? I don't know how many touchdowns he'll put up, maybe 1, 2. I don't think a ton there, but definitely could develop into a much bigger threat as a receiver than he was at Virginia Tech. And let me know your thoughts, comments below on James Mitchell. What grade do you give him? Thank you for watching, and I'm out.